Let's talk for a moment about legato tonguing on trombone. This is one of the most difficult hurdles that any young trombonist has to cross. The reason for it is it's a highly coordinated activity, legato tonguing that is, for the trombone, that involves a little bit more advanced ability in terms of knowing how to change notes across partials, the slur for example. It also requires that they have a collection of notes they can pull from, at least an octave's worth of notes or diatonic octaves worth of notes to play. And it requires they already have an understanding about how to control their air, and we as teachers have already identified bad habits in closing the throat or anything like that. Let's first of all deal with what legato tonguing should be. Legato tonguing for the trombone is the sound that has the same kind of smooth sound that you're going to get out of your trumpet players and your euphonium players and your clarinet players for that matter. It's that same smooth sound that they're just going to call generic slurring. The problem is that on the trombone, because it uses this slide rather than valves to change notes, it's going to need some articulation because sometimes you're not crossing a partial, you're remaining in a same partial. For example, moving from a D in fourth to an E flat in third. Those can't be achieved by just slurring. You'll get a gliss. So the legato tongue is the device used to create that break between the notes. Some things we need to think about first of all. Probably creating a separate exercise in legato tonguing for your trombonist will be a good thing to do. Having looked at many method books over the years, many of them have the just for trombone section. If your method book doesn't, just create a simple exercise that might use repeated notes in a single octave and do an exercise of quarter notes, for example. All legato, all smooth, all connected. The important thing is get something out there for them to play on that's going to work specifically legato tonguing. And if you haven't sat down and played a trombone for a while, those are going to be notes that have to be legato tongued are going to be notes that are on the exact same partial and have no break as you cross or move on the slide. Okay, so all within one overtone series. How does the tongue work when it's using legato? Well, in tonguing, it involves using the least amount of tongue possible and the lightest syllable. So early on in your sixth grader's life, you will have taught them ta, and probably by the time they get to the end of their sixth grade year or they're moving into seventh grade repertoire, you're going to have to start talking about legato. Most method books will use the word da. Now if you say ta and da to yourself, back and forth, ta da, ta da, ta da, I think you're going to notice that two things are different. The da is going to use a slightly different strike point for most people. It's also going to use a slightly different amount of tongue. For me, it uses less tongue. For other people, it sometimes uses a little bit more or a little wider patch of tongue. That's not important. It's just what's important is that you sort of recognize when you say syllables like ta and da, you figure out what the mechanics are to get how your body creates those different sounds. When you go to teach it to the young students, I would use a similar idea. I'd have everybody, first of all, just tongue some ta notes, blowing just air, ta, 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 and then I might also have them say, okay, let's contrast that by going da, 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 and maybe ask for who notices a difference here. And I think you'll probably get some of the answers that you're going to want to talk about. A lighter tongue, a faster tongue, maybe a slightly placement that's slightly further back. Always important to recognize that every student is an individual and that nobody's tongue is going to move the exact same way. And if you have a student that's having particular problems with legato, you're probably going to want to take them aside and just work with them and try and figure out what it is. Maybe they're tonguing with too much tongue. Maybe they're tonguing too far forward. We can deal with that in the troubleshooting section. But for legato tongue, once you establish how to get the tongue to work, the softer tongue using the word da, and moving the air through, we probably want to talk about how to move the slide. A little bit of this is about slide technique. With the trombone, it's all about timing. you can talk about moving your slide too fast or too slow. I generally like to keep it more simple than that. I want your slide to move in time. So a metronome for the whole band is a good thing to use, and for your trombones will be a good thing to use too. And you basically want to watch their arm. In fact, a great exercise to use will be something that you might use regularly in a warm-up, a scale, and ask your trombonist to not look at you, but to watch their slide instead. And you'll help them keep time by using a metronome over a stereo system or something. And you'll get them to watch their hand and try and let the challenge be, let their hand move in time to the beat. So if my beat were, I'm working hard to try and make sure that hand moves with my foot tap, or my hand moves with the beat I'm hearing over the stereo. All the while, I'm using that nice flowing air and that da tongue. One further thing to think about with legato tonguing too is that when your players become more advanced, they're going to start noticing that some notes have a slur to them. They cross a partial and they don't have to tongue. I think it's probably important at an early age, and we're probably talking about the 8th grade level at this point, that you allow them to incorporate slurs into their legato tonguing. In modern America, the methodology used for legato tonguing for trombones these days tends to be a combination of slurs or tongues. When it's appropriate, slur. Whenever it's impossible, legato tongue. The point will be, though, that you want to try and make the slur and the tongue sound the same, because after all, these trombonists are going to have to play with the trumpet players, for example, and you want to make sure that the sounds are similar. So, to show you the same scale I played just a moment ago, incorporating slurs along with legato tongues. If you were listening really close, you might have been able to discern when I slurred versus when I tongued. But the point is that they're fairly similar, and that's what you're going to be looking for out of your young players as you work on the legato tonguing. So to wrap it up, it's mostly about finding a nice soft tongue like da. There are other syllables you can think about too. Mainly no is a very good one. No, 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 no. Or using da along with a different vowel sound, do or d, for example. Secondly, it's finding a slide speed that's in time, so working with a metronome and getting your students to watch their hand sliding, moving it in time, using a scale or some exercise they already know. The last thing would be incorporating slurs and legato tongues together so that we get a more unanimous sound throughout the instrument and throughout the band.